Hey, can you hear me? I'm not getting any audio from you. Can you hear me?
Hi, I can hear you now.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I've been waiting in another room.
Oh, okay.
I think I joined from Zoom, um, the recurring meeting, and for some reason, no one was in it.
Uh-huh. I clicked on I think, call 5 link.
Yeah, yeah. For some reason, my invite, my recurring invite, and the things that go into first 100 don't seem to match. But anyway, right,
Uh,
cool. Looks like we're all here. Seb. Yeah, sorry everyone. I was just saying to Kripali, like I was waiting in a room as well,
Okay.
on my own. But
On his own. Right.
I joined from the
Okay.
Zoom thing. But whatever. Look, I guess I need to click the one in the meeting. Right, so hope everyone's having a good week. I tried to be a bit more organized apart from this and get more updates on first 100. So last week we did we were looking at the content marketing, and some of you have replied with your content marketing. So what I wanted to say about that is I really want everyone to focus content marketing on one asset. So there are a few different takes on what to do with the content marketing, but I'm trying to suggest that each of you focus on one great asset over multiple shorter things. Now, of course, in aggregate, you can get some results like John. I just quickly read your comment and you were saying you did a few different things and it has gotten you some people on the free trial.
Yeah.
But what I would suggest is like identify anything that seems to really click or resonate and then do it in more detail or engage influencers into it or present it in a new way or make it more comprehensive. So what I'm looking for from you guys is maybe the ultimate directory of X or the 200 question quiz, like the longest or most involved quiz, or the most expert opinions, or I'm just looking for a way to make something that really is great, because one piece of content marketing is so much better if you just get it to that point where it's got good advocacy, good sharing, than lots of small bits. Now, of course, small bits can help us test different angles, different content formats, but long form is the powerful thing. An example of when I say long form, I mean heavily involved. So another example is just creating a community would be a piece of content marketing. Creating your own Slack channel that's focused on a very specific niche could be a form of content marketing. Hosting a webinar could be a piece of content marketing. All of these would take a lot more time and work, but ultimately would build richer relationships than short form content or low level kind of itty bitty content. So I just wanted to explore that a little bit more and understand if everyone's clear on what I mean. Seb, Jack, right. Just checking who's here because Eliza's coming, but he's coming late. So let's just go through what you guys have done. Some of you have posted it, which is awesome. But from this point on, we're going to be very structured. I know a lot of you are working on your beta audiences and just looking at that net promoter score and evolving your products based on user feedback. But concurrently, I want to start thinking about content assets that are really going to assist you in building audiences later on. Because when the time is right, a good piece of content marketing that we promote effectively can drive thousands or tens of thousands of people to your business. Right, so let's go through in order. I'm just looking at the lesson because there were a few people that commented. Cool. But I'll just start with Kripali in terms of your content marketing. Did you say you're still working on something?
Yeah, I am. I'm just not happy with where it is at the moment because it's a bit of guidance on pricing, and how I've priced our product.
Sure.
But my husband's looked at it and kind of said it's shit. So
Okay.
I'm just trying to get it in a better place.
So he's honest as well, like me. So what is the theme of the content? Is it how to price a software as a service business?
Yeah, it is. But I think I've written it more like a story and how I've done it rather than how people can learn from it. So just
I think stories are really effective when you've got like a really great outcome. So for example, how increasing my price tripled my revenue, because that's kind of like an interesting anecdote that leads through like an emotional journey to like this outcome. And some people learn through stories, but I think actionable advice, tips, influencer and expert opinion might be better. What did your husband say? It sounds weird, but was he saying the same? What was he encouraging in terms of?
Yeah, it was more that kind of, the title is about pricing your SaaS product, but then when you start reading, it's more a story, whereas you want maybe something like a 3-step plan or key lessons learned and a bit more structure to it.
So tell us some of the things that you are learning about pricing. Is this
so I think, like, for example, I started thinking I'll have a free tier and a paid tier, and so just have those two options. But as I went through my feature list, I realized that one set of users would want to use this, but another set wouldn't. So having multiple paid versions, and then I think I had about 7 paid tiers by the end of the exercise, and then I kind of consolidated down. Whereas he was saying a lot of people would be the same, that they'd just think to do those, just like 1 free and 1 paid, and how you kind of came to that realization. And then just things like why to have a free trial versus not.
So are you using all of your own opinion in this, or do you intend to engage other founders and ask them why did you go for a free tier?
Yeah, I've spoken to a couple of other founders, and I think, like you said last week, some of the guidance that I'd found, I think there was a blog, there was one by Neil Patel and one by somebody else. So looking at those and then having kind of extracts of those and referring back to that, it's come from here, so that maybe they can support that content when I do post it.
And there's also you can engage obviously these big influencers, but also the micro influencers and the founders, because you're going to increase the chances of sharing. But if you got a retweet of one of those people, that would be absolutely awesome. Another thing is just think a lot about the headline. Maybe it could be 10 startups that remove their free tier. Why? Because I'd read that. I'd be like, okay, some of my clients are using a free tier, but we do debate a lot over the use of a free tier. It's always kind of like, should we try without it? Should we try credit card first or credit card second? As in credit card with the trial or not. So I think maybe soliciting some opinions. You can also do a survey. You put it into London startups and just ask 100 founders, does your software as a service have a free tier? Yes, no, and why? And you could curate some of those opinions, and you could introduce it with 86% of software as a service startups are using a free tier. The main reasons were X, Y, and Z. And then you can do like some opinions on it, and all of it might not go in one blog, but some of this could support the main blog. So the main blog is your kind of core asset, and then the ancillary stuff drives from your socials and maybe from Reddit and from Hacker News into the main asset. So it's lots of different angles on the same. But what would be really cool, because I want a V1 by next Monday, so that we can review it ready for Wednesday, pushing it live. And that's kind of what I'm hoping from everyone, because I'd like to start measuring how these perform. If your content doesn't work, obviously we have the option to iterate or rework the content. So don't fixate on it. Just do that thing like deep work, put your headphones on and just bash something out, rework it, refine it. But the structure is going to help. So I think maybe the structure might be a bit of an issue there. Like the stylistic approach and the way the article's architected is, the area sounds very interesting. I would definitely read something like that. If you had some new info, like I say, like a survey, I'd definitely be interested. So there's software as a service Facebook groups, there's like 50 of them.
Oh,
I'd
okay, cool.
go into them and just say, hey, I'm doing a piece of research on how many software as service companies use free trials. Maybe break it down by 5 or 6 different industries.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
say like free trial versus no free trial in different industries.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's go on to John, and because I'm interested to see what you did, where you did this like little bits here and there. I'm just going to get a Diet Coke. Go on.
Yeah. So in April, I started, trying to build my Twitter following, and had some pretty good success. Tweeting regularly, trying to kind of share what I'm working on, share things I'm learning along the way, because I feel like that's a huge asset, right? For my current efforts and things I do down the line, to have people like who get to know me and are following along.
What techniques are you using to grow the following specifically?
Mainly since I've my accounts like, well, when I started it was like, I don't know, 150 followers. It was mostly engaging with other people who are doing similar things to what I'm working on in the same space, but with thousands of followers, trying to get into their feeds, like when they post, responding quickly with something of value or something that I think they may interact with.
Your line's gone a bit quiet. Has it gone quiet for other people?
Yeah, it's quiet for me as well.
Okay. But I think what you were saying was engaging with influencers.
Yeah.
And well-known people, which is a great technique. And one thing you can do is obviously tweet them and engage with them and follow them, but also think about your replies to them and how other people will see those replies. So a good example of that is Indie Hackers did a tweet saying, what's your favorite resource? I think Kripali replied with my first 100 board.
Yeah.
It sent me like 1,000 visits. Sorry,
Nice.
1 minute. There's someone at the door. But my housemate's going to get it. So that sent me 1,000 visits, and that was just a reply. So think about how you can, they call it hijacking, which is a bit tacky, but what you're looking at is opportunities there. Maybe you could post content regularly, like every Monday, do a tip or an idea, just to be a little bit strategic about it. I'm not saying like lose your soul or your personality, but just focus on almost like scheduling content. Sorry, 1 minute.
Sure.
It's not working.
No, it is working because I heard it before.
It's weird.
Yeah.
The guy doesn't know what he's doing. I'll have a look out my window. Sorry, we're having a front door disaster. The level of professionalism. Okay, I'm trying to make up with it with energy. But John, could you keep going through some of the other content marketing you've gone through? It says here you were looking at discussions on Indie Hackers and a YouTube video, which is great.
Right. Yeah. So on Indie Hackers, I'm targeting .NET developers in the indie hacking space. So like just trying to like I started one discussion. What other indie hackers out there are using .NET? Like I'd like to connect with other people, and I was surprised by the kind of the number of people, because I think .NET developers are underrepresented in that space. So, and that led to some discussions. I mean, people clicked through my profile and saw the link of what I'm working on, and so that got some traffic. And then I posted a YouTube video on my site saying basically how you get started with my service. So I've tried a few different things, kind of the shotgun approach, and then of course a personal blog, which every now and then I haven't been as consistent on that, but posting, making posts about things I'm working on, and trying to drive some of the traffic I'm getting, or my follows on Twitter over there as well.
The scooter. Yeah. Sorry, guys. My electric scooter's here. So, so the indie hackers thing is really useful. They're sending me thousands of visits a week. Again, what I do is I just focus on that core asset that I've made, which is my first 100 users board. And anytime someone says, like, how do I do this? I share it, or other people are sharing it for me. So this is how one great piece of content marketing can be used time and time again to build an audience.
Sure. Yeah, and I've seen your the things you've published, and they seem very shareable, right? Because it's like 100 things you can do to improve your landing page effectiveness, or your various things that it seems to appeal to a wide audience, right?
Yeah.
And it's the headline is very grabbing for someone who wants to do that sort of thing. In my particular space, I mean, exception monitoring is pretty dull, right?
Yeah.
So I struggle with, okay, it's hard to find the one great piece of content. So I'm kind of taking the approach of, well, let's just share my journey. Here's how I did this.
Yeah.
I think that has more human interest than kind of the dull, strictly, here's information about exception monitoring.
But could you, okay, I'll give you some examples of content I think that could be like high level, but I do think there's a lot of value in sharing your story. My fear would be a little bit that you end up, I've talked a little bit about this last week, but making an indie product for indie makers that stays within the indie community and doesn't really spread further than it. So I can tell you that I can build really big audiences off of the big, of indie hackers. But my customers really are people that don't live in those communities, when I'm really honest about where my custom comes from. So one client I had who did a code analysis tool had analyzed 10 billion lines of code through his tool. And what we did is we did a top 10 issues that we found in Salesforce code based on that analysis. So one thing that people who are creating products that analyze things can do is identify recurring themes and use that to create insights back into the industry. So your tool does some sort of bug checking or something, right?
Yeah.
Let's use that to say, okay, these are the most common bugs. Or this is how frequently bugs occur, or, I mean, translate that for me into what your product does, but I think you get the idea, or does it just not equate?
I get the idea, and if I think that's a great suggestion if I had more users. I think, I'm too early in my, in my life cycle in the life cycle of my product to be able to do like some, draw conclusions from analysis on my data.
Yeah, then maybe what you could do instead is identify people talking about the relevant things that you know will come up, and just jump into those conversations on the relevant forums, just giving the most comprehensive answers. So look for things that come up regularly that maybe need someone to sit down and just write a long form post. In content marketing, we call that bottom of the funnel. It's very specific content, but it's really related to what you do. So although it might not be super shareable, which we call top of the funnel, that's like getting as many people, like the type of content I make, it's narrow, but it's very specific. So you can use bottom of the funnel content to maybe only engage 20 or 30 people a week, but it's enough because those people have really high intent, because if they're looking for this piece of information, your service will probably benefit them. So imagine if your product was a blog post and it was just like, there is an issue with this and that's why I've made the product. That's the type of content space we're talking about, the very specific use case of why you would use an indie maker's tool to help you in this situation. So it might be just talking about specifically you versus a competitor. It might be talking about something that's very common that happens that really you just decided to automate, and therefore you then released it as a product. But we would call that bottom of the funnel. So we're not looking for thousands or tens of thousands. We're looking for 10 to 50 visits a week, but with a very high intent. Once they've read your article, they're like, you know what, he's right. This guy knows what he's doing. I should have built a tool like this, but I'll give his a go.
I got it.
So
that makes sense. Yeah.
A slightly different angle, Because you are right about what you said as well with the 10 billion lines thing, right? We did a bit of a paid test behind it, and we got cheap traffic, but it just, not lots of those people were willing to pay for an enterprise tool. They were just curious about what these common errors were. So of course, top of the funnel is about like getting volume and then removing people who aren't relevant as they proceed through the buying process. Bottom of the funnel is already the bit where it's quite narrow.
Can I just jump in there,
Yeah.
Ollie, just on that one about the bottom of the funnel stuff? Just the other day there, I watched a really good talk on MicroConf. MicroConf have opened up their whole back catalogue of all their videos of all their conferences over the last, some brilliant content in there. And there was somebody that was speaking exactly about this very thing. And when you get zero customers or around about zero customers, concentrating on the bottom of the funnel rather than the top, because that's your quality leads rather than the people you'd be catching at the top. Yeah. So I'll see if I can find the specific video, because it's really good. It's stuff that I hadn't obviously thought about at all before in terms of sales and marketing, but it talks about the bottom and the top. And I'll see if I can find it, and I'll share it with everyone.
Yeah, that's awesome. Put it in the community, and because I'd love to look at that. But here's a good example of bottom of the funnel that's quite interesting. Is sometimes people come to me, or I go to people and go, why didn't you just do this? And they go, what do you mean? And I kind of spell it out for them, and they go, can you clarify this? And when I look back through the conversation, I'm like, there's a blog post in this. It only appeals to a very particular type of problem, but I could just put this online right now and it would already cover a few other people's problems. So the other day I was filming a video that my mate edits, and he sent me back a grid. And he was like, you need to put your face in the middle of this grid, because where your face is positioned, you don't look great on camera, sort of, because you're not, but he sent me the grid. And I was like, you've just made content marketing, because you could just push that onto your Twitter and say, look, before and after, so every time someone's using your product and they're like, why doesn't it do this? Or you just helped me do that. Think about how that micro content could also serve that little bit of that funnel. Because sometimes I find myself, like even in this, right, I could break this video down into intricate clips, and each one could cover a different topic. And I think during your user cycles, you're probably giving people the equivalent to content marketing, but you're not necessarily translating that onto your blog or onto your channel. So just again, think about everything you create as content, even if it's private, and what can be taken from that private situation and put online to build audiences.
Got it.
Okay, but with that, let's just think of an objective for you. So do you think we can have some, either a summary of the stuff you're working on and some stats, or an actual specific piece of content in time for the next call?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, and what we're going to do we might not have time, but let's see. But this week's lesson is going to be focused on building out your ecosystem document. Now, we talked about this on and off, but literally it's a summary of where your persona hangs out. So I'm going to share with you an example for London startup founders. And afterwards, what I want you to do is basically create a matrix listing all the podcasts, all the communities, all the email lists that your potential user subscribes to or listens to or attends. And that will give us a really good mapping, and will also help us create content marketing, because when we go into those communities, or when we read those email lists or listen to the podcast, it will become very apparent quite quickly where there are questions that are unanswered that we can create content to serve. So it's quite interesting to just listen to a few podcasts, watch a few videos, and think, do you know what? This kind of .NET developer is always talking about how much they hate the recruitment industry. So why don't I do a blog post about, that would go top of the funnel again, because it's less relevant, but I'm setting all of you a task, which I'll list after, as part of this lesson, which is to build an ecosystem mapping for your potential buyers. And as well as that, we need the content done. So where are you at? Your task was to get a customer. Did you get one?
Okay, so it happened to be like the worst time to like self-promote on Twitter for like the past almost a week.
Well, that is true, yeah.
So like all the activity kind of like died, except the people outside America and well, the people who don't want to like hang in that circle. So even my activity kind of like dropped because I can't reply to people when people aren't posting or they're posting.
So did you just naturally quieten down this week just as a reflection of the conversation being so focused on something else?
Yeah, so I spend that time to look at like marketing in general, and then I see that, you know, like content marketing or affiliate or like advertising. So, and it just clicked like a few hours ago that like people really need like quality traffic, but they don't always get it because I don't know, like if you're running AdWords, then you don't like everyone has ad blocker on. It's like super easy to do, or like everyone's banning Facebook or something now, or Instagram, and then that's a thing too. So, but turns out that I'm joining a few groups of like hundreds of like indie newsletters, like the ones with like 100, 2,000 to 10,000 something people, right? And so I'm thinking like those people are like a lot more engaged than anyone, right? So what if I just say, okay, maybe Krupali would like to have a budget for like advertising her thing for potential users, and she can tell me like who specifically she's looking for, and then I'm gonna look for like you know, a specific newsletter with like that kind of audience.
But is that the same as selling Twitter advice?
No, it's not the same, because Twitter advice is like not going on right now. Nobody's doing that.
You're pausing that business, and now you're going to do a marketplace, and it's going to have all the newsletter. I would use that marketplace because I wanted to find places to promote Roast My landing page. So your new idea is to do a marketplace of all the newsletters. And
I mean, that can come after like, because the buyers would be advertisers and sponsors, right? So
yeah,
like the supply side is not a big thing. I can build that anytime on like a Google Sheet or something, but I kind of like have a thing almost ready to scrape. But the thing is, I think I'm offering as like a concierge service or like a productized service where I don't know what's the rate for it, maybe 20%.
Newsletters.
Right. So 20%. If you don't get results, then full refund.
Okay. Would anyone use this service in the group to promote their business? Jack?
Yeah, possibly. So the idea is a marketplace of newsletters and stats broken down, or sorry, what is the service that you're sort of bringing to it?
Okay, so let's say John is targeting who is it, Laravel or certain like
.net, yeah, but either way, yeah.
Okay, so .net users, and I'm gonna like find the .net newsletters with like engaged people, because John doesn't need like 1,000 people. He just need like a dozen to like sign up, and hopefully 5 of them will be amazing, dedicated people so that he can build his product better. So I figure he has like a small enough budget to work on it, and
so
then like I charge 20% of that and then go do that. And then if there's like no result, I fully refund him, or if he gets results, then everyone's happy because he gets enthusiastic users instead of like posting Facebook ads or like trying to like scour forums that .NET people hang out or something, which he would need to do, but I'm just thinking of like doing like a very specific service, like headhunting, or
this
I don't know.
We're going to be doing the Trello boards or the Notion boards, which has our ecosystem on. And one of the sections we look at is the newsletters in this industry from influencers. So for example, if it was a founder one, it would include all of the marketing newsletters for founders. maybe we can all send you our Notion boards and you can populate our email list ones to demonstrate how the service would work.
Okay. Yeah.
So, for example, you can find potential newsletters for John, potential newsletters for Kripali, and just populate them. So to show how you would curate a list of newsletters that we should reach out to.
Have you like, where did you put this Trello board, or it's not like up yet?
You're going to make them, but I'm going to show you an example now if you like.
Right.
So an example, I'll load an example, but let's go on to, that's very interesting. Let's go on to Jack.
Yeah. So I was talking to you about I think we had a bit of a conversation about what content marketing to do and the idea behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the moment, I've been working on that alongside sort of like community stuff, trying to build that out. So we've now starting to get some users. So we've hit 30 signups now and 110 boards created within the software. So starting to sort of get drip fed feedback now and starting to build on that really. And then
who's your persona again? Can you quickly remind me who you kind of finished with?
So we went with small teams, sort of, and then even more niche than that, sort of creative teams is what we're targeting at the moment.
Like creative agencies, that type of thing.
Yeah, creative agencies, because we're looking to add a few more features that highlight sort of the creative process, whether that be linking in various other products or some of the flows of approval.
Because what I would say is when we were discussing your content marketing, I was struggling a little bit. And the reason is because it was quite broad. You were sort of like tips marketers, tips for this, but shouldn't we go a bit niche and just say like, I don't know, 6 quickly growing creative agencies get interviewed by you, and you interview the founders of these creative agencies. That would allow you to open up conversations with them. Sure. To potentially get them on your product, and maybe they could just talk about their existing processes, which would allow you to gather feedback, but also allow you to share that with the ecosystem so that other people with creative agencies could read about it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something like that. What I was thinking really was just from like what you've done with the 100 stuff, it was sort of based off that. And if you get 100 voices, or the idea of 100 voices of Twitter, of LinkedIn, is identifying those people which are within small teams, and what their, maybe not their tips, but some sort of question.
It's got to
how that links back to.
I think the reason my board worked really well is because it's 100 ideas for your first 100 users, which all start up. So I'm thinking, what is the equivalent for your buyer persona? So if I'm the head of people in a creative agency, so I'm the buyer potentially for what you're doing. What's like a universal question that or a universal challenge they have? Like heads of people really focused on onboarding. So maybe you could do like a list of the 10 or 20 best company onboarding experiences. And what I'm talking about here is like, some of these companies do things where they have like a conga line when someone joins. It's all a bit naff and cheesy, but you could maybe highlight different kind of employee onboarding experiences. It's not as good, I think, as a format, but the point is it's got to be relevant to your persona, right? So what is something they really care about, and how that has 100 to list. I like the idea of using 100 or 50 or just something to, a number helps, and basically it's arbitrary, but it does help make it more shareable. But you've really got to think like, what do they really care about? Right. So when you get tips and hints, it can't be just like for productivity. It's got to be for a specific thing they think about, would be my guess. I think 50 tips for productivity is probably like, or for marketing, it's a little bit too vague in terms of like its engagement on your social channels, in communities. People be like, that's interesting, but it doesn't quite, I don't have a burning need, I
guess it's quite generic as well. If you sort of go in, you type in 50 productivity hacks or tips, you're going to get some of the big
Life Hacker and things
stuff like that, websites which do something similar.
Yeah, I think you can do productivity hacks, but they have to be productivity hacks for keeping habits, or for improving your health, or for losing weight. They had to fall under a slightly more niche angle, because
Yeah.
productivity hacks on its own is potentially a bit vague. But I'm not
Sure.
saying the format of using 50 is bad. Obviously,
Yeah.
I used it myself. But I'm thinking just like, how can you make it more niche but still have that kind of broad headline appeal? So
Yeah.
mine was 100 ways, which is the format, to get your startup. So it was for founders, because it's your startups, 100 users. So you can infer from that my persona is startup founders, and they're early stage because they've got 0 users currently, and they want. So even though the headline feels quite broad, it does reveal a lot about what it's for. So
Yeah.
what is the persona and what is the challenge? So is your persona the founder? Like, so it could be 50 different sources for getting your first client when you're a creative agency, or how to become a creative, how to switch from being a freelancer to a creative, founding a creative agency, or a week in the life of these leading creative agencies, and or a day in the life, or a podcast where you tour their office, or you talk, or maybe like it's creative directors and you just get them to talk through their favorite piece of work. So it's like, Humans of New York type thing, but instead of it being an interview of a human, well, it is still a human, but it's like their creative work, and in the context you're just showcasing one beautiful piece of work. Maybe it's like Where I Get My Idea, 100 people talk about, or 50 different exercises for ideation when you work in a creative agency.
Yeah.
Or tips for getting into that career. Just get it a little bit narrower, but still make sure it has a kind of broad appeal.
So it's almost got this, like you say, the funnel idea. So it's capturing initially quite a, like tips, and then it's bringing it down into that sort of smaller funnel where it could sort of appeal to more people, but also it's got that specific niche to it.
Traditionally, how the funnel works is top of the funnel content is just like BuzzFeedy type content, and it gets a lot of people on. And what you're ultimately trying to do is then probably get people into a mailer, which is much more focused on you and that persona, your business and that persona, and how the two meet. But it would be like a curated mailer. And from the mailer, you drive them into content, which is, if you've now established that the way you're running your creative agency sucks, you want to consider us. So that you're going, and then to close at the bottom of the funnel, you might have something that really is focused on how to migrate from this platform to your platform, or how, a case study of another company, which is very, very specific. Like, no one really wants to read a case study unless it's like, okay, that's a company like mine.
Yeah.
So traditionally the funnel is kind of like, depends on where they're at. You want to capture wide first, and then just get the content to be more and more specific as you target directly the more relevant people.
Sure.
I wonder where creative agencies and their employees hang out. I wonder if they go to meetups. I wonder if there's Zoom calls like this, but for them, or do they not do that? And that's what we'll find out in the ecosystem mapping, because if it doesn't come easily, finding where these people are, potentially I would be looking at another persona, because your product appeals to lots of personas. So if, like, for example, I can tell you right now that there'll be loads of Facebook groups for SMEs in London for different categories, right? So we know that outreach to them would be easy, but we don't know if that segment would convert well. But all I'm saying is you might be, as you start to map out the ecosystem, you might think, do you know what? For example, John's doing it specifically for .NET, and that's his area of interest. But if he found that there was a load of demand in another tech stack for this type of product, there is an opportunity to look again, maybe partner with someone else, because maybe there's so much more opportunity in terms of building an audience in those spaces. So do one piece of content, do it really well, but iterate through it. Don't overthink it. But if it doesn't work, let's look again at different audiences in your case, because I just don't know where creative directors hang out personally.
Yeah, bit of a harder one, really. And that's what I'm trying to find out at the moment. And I don't know whether there's any sort of specific place, or whether it's a case of just finding them online and sort of talking to them, like you say, and just seeing what they do and how they get their tips as well. Maybe, getting some of these interviews and then how they find new ideas, new ways of doing it, and seeing if there's any pockets of sort of commonality and groups there.
Yeah, I mean, the interviews are amazing, right? Because they actually allow you to ask the types of questions we're speculating on. So just by asking to interview someone, you basically get free reign to ask them questions that can help your business. So you can actually say, well, what communities do you go to? What newsletters do you read as part of your interview process? And doing that will actually allow you to build out your ecosystem. So let me quickly share I did one just as an example for London founders, right? So this was literally to demonstrate where, if I was targeting London founders, I would go. So there's Slack channels called Buffer Community, Online Geniuses, Growmance, Mind the Product, Resources for Humans, highly attended by UK founders. There's loads of subreddits here. There's all of these blogs, which are mainly in the UK. There's these email lists, which I put my own in there. There's these meetups. There's these communities. There's these directories. There's these influencers and blogs. The point I'm making here is that every persona, whoever it is, has a world in which they live digitally. And that world, you need to be able to gracefully enter, mobilize through content and drive into your product. You need to learn, listen, and educate those people. And the starting point is just mapping it out. Now, a lot of founders that I work with, they get to this point, but it takes them 5 years because it's all done organically, right? They go to a meetup and someone says, try Twitter and follow this guy. And then they follow that guy. And then he points to this woman who runs this event. So they go to that event. What I'm talking about is a strategic approach to identifying all of the places where your persona will be and mindfully entering them as quickly as possible to build your profile. And I'm not saying you have to go into all of them. You identify the opportunities and you double down on them. So for me, Indie Hackers worked really well, but for Harry Dry, he gets a lot more traffic from Reddit, for example, or, you know, I don't know his exact case, but he shared some of the stats. But the point I'm making is you don't want to be in 50 communities ultimately, but you do want to use these communities to learn about what works, what doesn't, and then focus in them to drive referral and content. Going into these is a very good way to get content ideas, because if you went into 10 communities, you would start to see within half an hour 50 things that do well. And you can literally strip it back and be like, why do people always ask this same question? And then create an asset to answer it, for example, the ultimate answer to that question. Anyway, right, does that make a bit of sense? Is that becoming a bit more clear with this whatever I call this, my own example here that I've made?
Can I ask a quick question? So this Trello board,
yeah, Notion, but yeah.
Is this like available to everyone, or is this your reference for good things
give you the
to
link
post?
to this, but I made this.
I'm just curious because, like, if you made this public, then that's effectively, you know, good marketing that you can schedule out over a protracted period of time. You're giving it to all of them in you know, in one go. So do you see what I mean?
Yeah, but it has. This is the whole point, right? Is I make one asset, but it's really, really good, and that gets people to share it loads. So if you identify content that starts to work and it's bite size, you can aggregate it into an ultimate list or a guide or a white paper or a webinar. But what I did here, this looks like a lot of work, but it took about a day or less than a day. It's probably about 3 hours because I already knew this world. I already went to half of these events and was already members of these Facebook groups. It took 10 minutes to write down all the Facebook communities that talked about or were for London founders. But the point is that I put that out there and was just like, share it. And
so you think that has more value than sending out each link, you know, twice a week, once a week?
You can do both. You then send facets from that board and say, for the full list, click through to the board. So you could, for example, say, here's 5 incredible Slack channels you should join this week. By the way, if you want 90 other resources, click here. This is quite a meta document because people in this persona also want to see this document. So it's quite a funny one because this document is for me to know where I should reach out. But at the same time, other founders are like, oh, I'd like to know other places I can reach other founders. So this is in some ways a good, in some ways a bad example. Imagine this for like stay-at-home mums. And it's like, okay, they're on Mumsnet, they read this newsletter, they watch this TV show. It's not interesting to you anymore because you're not targeting mums specifically, but it just shows you that we can build a rich kind of mapping of where these people are, where they get their information from and what they care about. So remind me, yours is the productivity people, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what you said to Jack actually is quite pertinent to me about how I really need to focus in on specificity rather than sort of just, you know, headlining everything with productivity, because it needs to be a bit more niche. You know, your thoughts are appreciated on that, because if my whole thing's productivity, then pushing it down a niche is just sort of, I don't know, like assuming people's problems as to why they're using the app and not necessarily based on any user feedback or anything. So
some people are obsessed with productivity and they go on Lifehacker and they go into certain Slack channels and they read interviews and listen to certain podcasts because they're really focused on life hacking. And so there is a persona that is pretty global there. You know, there's a person who, whatever area of their life it is, they want to hack it to make it better. But you've also got very specific things, like you might have pet owner life hacks. So it's all about how to like care for your pet, save money, do things for pets more carefully. They're not relevant to you. But what you're looking at is the intersect, well, they might be, but what we're looking for is like, who's a big enough audience that I could do a good piece of marketing for, but also do it in a way that I can convert them down into the funnel. With you, you're doing a productivity app. So I would be looking at a persona of, maybe it is like freelancers, because it's potentially, we could say, harder to manage your own time than have it managed for you. And it's a common theme that we see with freelancers, isn't it? Freelancers are often saying like, the challenge for me is productivity. And your tool helps with productivity. So are we looking at freelancers? If we're looking at freelancers, are we looking at creative freelancers like writers? Because writers, I think there's a type of freelancer, like, I don't think a builder or a gardener has problems with productivity because they turn up on site and they just work, right? They're not doing Pomodoro to make sure that they're doing the hedges quick enough. So my view would be that we're talking about knowledge workers who really struggle because they're in front of a computer or a phone. So we can immediately eliminate people that don't sit with a phone or a device from your persona, your obvious persona, your low-hanging fruit. And yeah, you can choose to go niche or you can choose to go broader, but until you're making content, you're not going to learn what clicks anyway. With you can go into productivity groups, but I think you need to find a more niche angle on it, which is like, yeah, creative copywriters, right? Who want a technique to manage their freelance business. And they've got multiple clients and they've got multiple workloads and they've got multiple deadlines. And they're trying to get them all in harmony, and your tool can assist with that, would be my view. I mean, I think a founder is a good persona for you. So, because a founder is spinning lots of plates, and the emotional language that you can use with your product is, are you spinning a lot of plates? Are you obsessed with productivity tools, but you never seem to get any increase in outcome? I think they call it busy work, you know, when you feel busy, but you get fuck all done. Someone actually said that to me. They were like, look, because I'm coaching them. They're like, the difference with what I've been doing in the last week is it's not busy work. It's work that seems to actually be moving my business forward. And I think that language is something your persona potentially would resonate with. They feel busy, but they don't actually see the outcomes. So
yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Saying that in the productivity groups, it's a bit of an echo chamber. What you're saying is exactly what they're saying, just it's spun around sort of perpetually forever.
Yeah.
As a result, we've sort of targeted individual people to try and sort of draw ourselves out of that sort of, you know, back-patting ecosystem of everyone just congratulating each other.
Yeah.
we've had a little bit of feedback. We didn't have 5 response to surveys. We had 3 response to surveys and then 1, sort of feedback DM, as it were.
Mm.
And they all sort of go down a bit of sort of the same line with, they like what we're doing and the sort of corrections you've implemented as well, Ollie. But they haven't really offered, and it's probably the questions that we pose to them. They haven't really offered any sort of viable suggestions or alternatives. So I think
that's fine. What you need to be doing is listening and resolving their issues rather than trying to get them to give you solutions. People give you really horrible product solutions. It's your job as like the product owner to identify the problem and respond rather than say, oh, would you like it if it did that when I click there? That isn't a good way of using it. So
no, that's what we focused on. We focused more on, the questions were more focused around sort of qualms with productivity apps in general rather than ours. And we didn't, So I'd say the only reason why we didn't have any suggestions about how to make ours better, even though we forwarded on our Invisio page, was because we didn't ask them what would make it better. We just said, what are your gripes with, productivity apps?
Okay, and when they sort of said, okay, well, I use Pomodoro, but this, did you then go, oh, that's very interesting. Have you tried any other did you keep digging?
With the survey, it's a logic-based survey. So if they say it goes down to another question. But after they've done the survey, it was a sort of thank you very much. It didn't press too much further because I need to assimilate that data. Like, I haven't had long.
10-minute call and just be like, hey, like that was really interesting. How does it feel? What would your next step be? Just very open questions that don't push an agenda onto them.
Mm-hmm.
But you just need to get more. You need to get more, but you're in a place where people are really jaded. If you identify as busy, the last thing you want to be adding onto your to-do list is giving someone feedback on.
It's more work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem, is they're busy people, or they're not actually busy. Your persona thinks they're busy, but they're actually not utilizing the right tools, or the tools aren't having the outcome. So this is why I use the phrase busy work. I feel like I'm working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., but when I get to the end of the week, I say, well, where was the meaningful stuff for my business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely. One thing as well that I think would be useful for this course is that for me, certainly, if we identify something to do for the week on Wednesday, then that only gives me sort of Thursday, Friday morning, Monday and Tuesday, because I sort of feel on those groups, like interacting with those people, it seems that the weekend is sort of their time, and I don't want to agitate them. So I just need to sort of temper my aspirations a little bit.
That's why this comes in parallel with content marketing, because content marketing is an amazing way to facilitate stronger relationships quickly, because people are going to be really keen to talk to you in these communities if you're the guy that made the amazing summary of all the best tools, or if you're the guy that did a teardown of something, or if you're the, if you start adding value in. And again, it's adding value is what opens people up to having more involved conversations. If you've gone in and you're like, can you fill in my survey? People are like, oh God, another guy that just wants someone to fill in a survey, which they're just going to send me email spam at the end of, and I'm busy. What you need to be thinking is, have you considered, if the Pomodoro isn't working for you, when someone talks about that, have you considered it might be because the tasks you're doing within the Pomodoro are not really the priority tasks? And if they say, no, I don't think of it like that, I just think as long as I get enough Pomodoros done, I'm good. You say, okay, so are all tasks equal? And you start giving value. And then you think, okay, let me do a list, 8 things that people get wrong about Pomodoro. And then you look through the last 50 people that talked about Pomodoro not working for them. And you say, hey, I made a list of reasons how people incorrectly utilize Pomodoro, like 8 Pomodoro myths, 8 80-20 myths, are you actually using these things? And then you go to someone who runs a podcast and you say, hey, I've done this infographic about why the Pomodoro doesn't work. And I noticed you were talking about the Pomodoro. Can I come on and maybe talk about some of the reasons Pomodoro doesn't work? And here's the thing, there's no hacks here. This is just a load of legwork, writing content, sharing content, repurposing content. And it just takes a really long time. So yeah, maybe it might need to be over a couple of weeks, and it is. I'm just trying to give a structure by setting the goals.
Yeah, of course.
But of course, if you can't do it, you can't do it. And everyone's an adult, can set their own pace. But ultimately, what I want on this course is to get people to the 100 users, over the 8 weeks. And, we're coming close, and we're not quite building the audiences that we need. But look, let's get on to Andy, because I know we're like well over, which is my fault. Obviously, if you, who's got time and who needs to go? Does anyone need to go? Because I know people just hang out. They don't really. Or do you want to stay and just see where we get to with Andy?
I've got until about past. I've got a quarter of an hour or so.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Well, Andy's done this document. If you guys want to look at it, it's in reply to the lesson. It's actually really comprehensive. So can you just walk us through what you've done here, Andy? Should I be thinking about business continuity? Business continuity advice for small businesses from experts across the globe. Great.
Yeah, so that first page that you see after the cover page is basically just an introduction as to why I compiled the document in the first place, what the question was that I asked, and a little bit about Business Boy Scout itself at the end, subtly in there, and then all of them are just the replies I got from the people, the influencers that I reached out to, the experts. So I took your advice, Ollie. I was waiting on two last ones to get me up to the 10, and I never quite got there. I only got the 9, but I just cut my losses, and I went with the 9, and nobody's even commented. The only thing was I thought about having the 10 in the title, but I had to strip that out, obviously. I published it last night, finally, after having done reviews and got everybody to sign off on their own edits. And straight away, one of them really, really enthusiastic about it and posted it on LinkedIn by herself without me even provoking her or anything like that.
Yeah, awesome.
And I was like, oh, brilliant. And I thought they're all going to be like that. And it just kind of petered off after that. But I haven't really pushed it myself. I put a post myself on LinkedIn, and I put a tweet on last night as well. But I know that's just the starting point. And I deliberately haven't done anything like that yet because I wanted to before pushing it any further.
This is an amazing start. Theoretically, you should spend as much time promoting this as you did making it, which would be several hours. The really obvious things are things like making sure you mention everyone on LinkedIn, you've included.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give it a day or so until everybody's at least seen it, and maybe give them a chance to post it themselves. And then maybe tomorrow or Friday.
Did you DM them saying it's live?
I shared, I uploaded a copy, but then I said, if you're going to link, would you mind linking it via this link?
Okay, cool. Which is where you collect the email address, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. See what they do. I would look, get onto a tool like Buffer and schedule maybe 15 posts over the next month promoting it, and just use different ways to promote it. Pull out quotes. Use a video of you scrolling through it. That can help increase reach on LinkedIn. Okay. Use a screen grab from different people and mention them. Maybe mention one person at a time, and then in another one mention everyone that contributed. Pull out like 5 top tips. Find ways to basically repurpose this as social posts that engage people. I would also add onto your list to go out to 10 or 15 people in this space that might find it useful, and share it with them and say, hey, I created this. I don't know who told me this, but one of my clients, actually, he has a newsletter, and he basically went to like 10 experts on LinkedIn and just said, hey, I think you'd like my newsletter. Do you want to join? And 8 wrote back going, yeah, please add me. He just asked. So maybe just find people, small businesses, maybe near to you, and just say, hey, I'm based nearby. This is about business continuity, which I bet you're thinking about right now because of the impact of COVID. I curated some expert opinion, and I've made it really easy to understand. So I think, yes, I could recommend a few refinements, headline, copy, structure, but I think it's great. I think it's a really strong start. And the more you engage and get it out there, the more you'll see what people click with, what they care about, and that will naturally help you reform it. Because, for example, this could easily be a top 10 list or a top 8 list, and you just take the core message from each person. It could also be a listicle of 8 people that are experts in this space. It could be turned into a webinar where you invite 3 of them on to discuss it with you and other people, like do a Zoom with them. It can be so many different things, but what you've done is you've done this starting point, which now, I'm assuming most of these 8 people know they obviously know who you are. You've made something beautiful, you've put them in it, you've given them an asset which they can promote. This is probably the most substantive, meaningful piece of work that's been done in terms of how it increases your visibility in that world and what you're doing. And you may even find that if you do a few of these over a few months, you'll start to get people refer to you and ask to be part of it. And, this is awesome, basically.
I had about 10 other guys who had engaged with me on LinkedIn and then just dropped off and stuff like that. And I'm hoping that maybe 1 or 2 will come back.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and say, oh, here's mine, sorry I was late, that kind of thing. And then maybe I can add a revised version and send that out as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would follow up with them and say, hey, I know you're really busy and you didn't quite get back in time, which is fine, but I'd love to share the guide with you. I'll be making more content. But honestly, if I've got something that works, if I've got something I'm proud of and I think is useful, I'm more than happy to repost it multiple times in different ways. So different assets, different copy. And meanwhile, grow your network by adding 10 or 15 people a day to LinkedIn in your space and just say, hey, I've recently launched this. I think you'll like it and I'm keen to see your updates. Make it about them. But the question more now is who do you want to read this? Because what you want to read this is clients of your these experts, but also SMEs. That's the challenge, is who should actually be reading this right now and how do we promote it to those people? Because on the industry side, you're doing very well, but on it's still B2B, but on the potential client side, we've got to make sure people are reading this, right?
Sure, yeah. And that's that was interesting what you were saying about that ecosystem, the mapping thing that you've got there, because after the link you sent last week, that was my next step. I just didn't have time to do it this week with trying to get the document itself out. So that was going to be my next step, is to do all that mapping and start seeing where it goes. So I've done some research and finding some forums, etc., but I haven't actually started pushing out yet.
There's 2 documents that are useful for you. One is the mapping, because that's where, and the other one is ways to increase content marketing. I've done another Notion board and it just shows you places. They very much overlap, but it talks about the techniques to grow engagement, how to reschedule and schedule posts with different angles, how to support the assets. So one's kind of like the what you do and the other's the where you do. A good example of how you could take this is maybe find someone who talks to SMEs or businesses in crisis, and just send it to the YouTuber or the podcast host and say, hey, there's some new insights in this. I'm more than happy for you to share it. And you could also start to, as you build an audience, again, yours would be good for a survey. What % of people have investigated this? What % have investigated it since and before COVID? And then take that insight to them and say, look, I've got some research that might make a good talking point on your podcast, for example. But it's a lot easier to do once you've done the mapping, because once you've got the mapping, you can engage and you can be like, oh, I get it. People are talking about this stuff, Yeah,
sounds good.
But yeah, well done. What does everyone think of this if you've seen it? It's pretty awesome, right?
Looks really smart, mate, and I think it's quite nice. And like you say, because you've got other people involved, you can now get them to push it out and repurpose their quotes or take some findings from those 8 people and start to use that as content as well.
and even build out from it. You could do a version 2 of this, or you can repurpose those quotes again in another document, in like, you know, build it out over the next few months with 50 people maybe, and then you can you can get them to push it out again if their quotes included still. So I guess there's quite a lot you can do to build on this.
Yeah.
Even reading some of these, I'm immediately like, that would make its own blog post. You know, some of the longer ones. There's
parallels as well. The interesting thing is there's the quotes as well, you know.
Yeah. I think
you can pick out.
I get the impression that you sort of are quite hesitant to sort of DM them about it because you're feeling like you're sort of burdening them with something that you've already asked for a favor on to get them to sort of quote. But I think their inner narcissist will want to know about it and they will sort of reblog it. I think it's sort of human nature in that.
Yeah, well, I think that's why I got them in the first place, you know, by kind of boosting their ego and, you know, by reaching out to them and, you know, explaining that I'm looking to you as an expert, you know, and then I think that's how most people responded in the first place.
And I think
it looks really good, mate.
Yeah, it does. One of the things you can do here is definitely, individual LinkedIn posts for each person, maybe taking the first sentence of what they wrote, which is very interesting. That headline you've done is really like a call to action. Someone wrote something like it's essential, using language like that. You have to know your process from end to end. It's not a big job. So maybe you could say like, what's this person called? Dr. Marco Baldrini discusses how even small businesses can really benefit and it's not a big job. So maybe you could say myth busted, you know, continuity planning for small businesses is massively time consuming. It's not actually a big job to get the best practice in place. Download my guide to understand what this person had to say on that topic with the Nat mention. But you need to be posting this on your LinkedIn on the assumption you connected to SMEs, because otherwise your audience isn't there, as well as that into communities. And I really think local, I keep talking about it, but like the commerce people at the council who talk to the SMEs, I wonder if you could go to them and go, look, I've curated this really cool list of advice, which is so relevant and topical right now. I'd love it if you could tell me if there's any way I could distribute it to your members. They might even say, look, if you send us a few hundred physical, we'll post them out. They really do stuff like that because their job is to keep those businesses informed and up to date. So they may even say, look, can you do a virtual conference on this? And you know, they might have an events calendar where they're like, okay, we need him to do, you know, you can become the kind of interviewer of one of these people. You know,
no, I mean, I'm already engaged with my local chamber, and funnily enough, one of the other counties has started running a business continuity workshop or webinar like a couple of weeks ago there. So I'm going to capitalise on that by following up with them directly and see if they'll share it on the back of that, you know.
Yeah, awesome. And then make yourself available to be on the next one.
Yeah.
You know, discussing being forward, like this is something I'm exploring and I spoke to some of the leading worldwide experts on it and this is what we discovered, you know, or even can you just drop it to the email list, Yeah, people will do, look, every attempt on that is something that maybe they'll say no, but they'll later engage you. Mm-hmm. I mean, after my first 100 thing did really well, I was like, I need to go to every incubator who's doing virtual events for their founders and offer up my services because it allowed me to pitch who I am to 100 people at once. So it's a really scalable thing. If you can get yourself in front of 50 people on a webinar, think how much influence you have in that versus one-on-one calls.
Yeah.
Or one-on-one outreach. So naturally, as your content kind of starts to sell and do well, you can use that reputation you're building to get you in front of more people. I think everyone on, any other questions before we go? Because yeah, I know it's all running behind.
Just quickly, Ollie, so for my next sort of accountability thing is increasing sort of the amount of feedback that I get from surveys, but equally potentially offering up a call to individuals and maybe start a bit of content marketing. I know that's a lot of things, but
I know you're really busy, but you need to be looking at like the quality of Andy's work even, and you know, reaching
Yeah,
out
completely.
if you can. But you are super busy. But just see if you can make space for an hour or two to get deeper into those communities and create content. And be goal oriented, you know, get something of meaning, of substance out, even if it's a single blog post or a single Q&A or a single commonly asked questions or a list of hacks or a webinar or whatever it might be. Even if it's like a relationship in place with like the one of the editors at Lifehacker UK or anything like that, just get something that's a milestone done, because it will re-engage you with that. But I get it when you're really busy, how it pushes in different directions.
Yeah, I'll have a little think. Thanks,
You need
Ollie.
to get your tool working for you so that you can gracefully work between your full-time job and your you're actually, you can't tell us that you're that busy because you are the king of productivity tools. So.
There's an irony in it, absolutely.
Yeah, you can't exactly reach out and be like, sorry, I'm late, I'm really busy, because they'll be like, wait, so your tool does or doesn't work then? All right, anyone else got questions for this week? I'm going to be putting recordings up a lot, like I'm always recording now, so the recording will go straight up so you can refer to it. Also, I turned off notifications from First 100 because they were just overkill, but I've realized now I totally forget about it. So I've switched it to daily. So if you have turned notifications off, because it used to flood me, and I'm guessing you guys are the same, maybe switch to just a daily one so you just don't miss what's going on, because I'd like to get more chat going in between the calls.
Wait, Ollie, if you don't mind me asking that, I still find this really difficult to...
Sorry, the line went a bit rubbish, but are you talking about the chat room on Mighty Networks?
No, I'm just asking, how do we do that configuration where we change it to once a day or whatever?
I think you have to go to, yeah, I find it impossible as well, basically, and I really hate this platform, but it's the closest to my kind of need. But I think you go to top right, and in there it says notifications, and you put something like Daily Digest.
Oh, yeah, the settings. All right, I see it. Okay, brilliant, thanks.
Because otherwise, when I because what I do is if there's something important, I click it to send you all a message. But even I turned it off because I was getting too many messages from me. So in the end, I can see why you might turn it off. But if you have, maybe consider just switching it to like a daily update. Jack, have you got anything or Wit at the moment that you want to check in before we go?
Okay, so like right after this, I'm gonna like post my proposal on like my available service, and then like if you're interested, you can like give me the details. I'll be asking like if you have like a budget for it, if you're like who are you looking for, and like what's your thing in your language, if possible, right?
So maybe you could do a post in the course thing, just saying what you need to hear from people. That would be really helpful. Okay, great. Anyone else before we go?
No, that's everything for me. Was there an ecosystem document we were meant to go through, or will you post that afterwards?
So what I'll do is I'm not quite sure the sequencing should be like do it before the call or after, but really on this case, I've shown you one. So now I'm going to say make your own for your persona. So what I'll quickly do is link to that one I've used, which by the way, if it is relevant to you, you can clone it and have it. I don't care. So Seb, if you want to reach out to founders because that fits with your persona, then fine. Andy as well, all of you, that was made to be public. But I think don't just stick there. You want to go more niche, right? Really to get the right communities and the right people listed. Andy, you might want to do an experts column and list your 10 or 8 experts on it, just so that, because everyone they follow who follows them on Twitter and LinkedIn, in effect, has influenced them. So they are part of the mapping. Influencers are part of your mapping. If there's a really famous Instagrammer who talks a lot about life hacks, then Seb, they're part of your ecosystem mapping. If there's a local organization that people are all members of, that's part of it. It's just anywhere that they interact in the context of that passion or that interest. So Jack, yes, the task for this week will be to create that whilst continuing to work on your content, because that obviously they work in harmony.
Yeah, that's great. Just yeah.
Okay, awesome. I'll put that together as a lesson 5, because I think this is cool 5, and we'll just keep going. Any questions during the week, just let me know on chat or email or in the feed, all right?
Cheers, Ollie.
Cheers,
Thanks
Ollie.
very much, Ollie.
Cheers, guys.
See you.
Cheers, bye.
Bye, 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 bye.